That's a beautiful journey.
I'm fluent. Well, I've been working there for 20 years. So, and Philip has only started to come over since he's retired about 4 or 5 years ago.
You're a sculptor.
That's right, I was a sculptor. Actually, and I also work for an atelier that I used to design, and I still do design furniture and different things to store in marble, everything in marble.
It's nice to have a talent like this.
It's different, isn't it? Well, thanks. I'm not exactly in the same league, but I do drop the name every once in a while.
I can't even draw a straight line on a piece of paper to be able to create a piece of furniture.
Oh, I think that most sculptors can't really draw a straight line.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Just trying to illustrate.
You never saw. Here's the problem. What am I supposed to say?
Here with me is Linda Dunn, who is branch manager of the Munster Library. On behalf of Hospice of the Calumet area and the library, it is our distinct pleasure to welcome a Midwesterner back to his home turf this afternoon, Phil Doran, along with his wife Nancy, and we are delighted to have them with us. I know that Phil has a very wonderful fan in his sister Debbie, who a few weeks back started sending me emails and phone calls and emails and phone calls and emails and phone calls. And it has been wonderful working with her because the enthusiasm not only generates from Debbie, but from everyone else who has heard and read anything about the elected Tuscan. So, I think Phil has information on his own that is going to tell you more about who he is and what he does. He asked me when he walked in this afternoon if I had read the entire book, and I had to admit no, because my daughter's bedside table has had the distinct pleasure of having Phil's copy of the book next to her bed rather than mine, so I plan to finish it after this afternoon. Thank you once again for being with us, and Phil Doran.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thanks for your nice introduction. Destroy the equipment. No, I wouldn't mind just having it here. Either shorter or taller or something. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming out here, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate the turnout. And I'd like to extend a special thanks to all the wonderful people who were involved in putting this together. Linda Dunn and her staff at the Munster Library. The Hospice of the Calumet area, Jane Langendorf for all her wonderful work, Director of Development, Nancy Feldman, President, Linda Dershowitz and Karen Bachman and everyone else who helped. And of course, my own sister, Debbie Feinberg, who, or as she's known in New York, Penguin's Regional Sales Manager for Munster, Indiana. So thank you one and all. And thank you all for coming out today. I had no idea there were so many people who hate Tuscany. I thought I was the only one, but you know, actually, I don't hate Tuscany. It's taken me some time, but you know, I've actually come to love the damn place. And who would blame me? I mean, it's wonderful. Tuscany is great. It's paradise. It's lovely. I mean, many of you have been there. You've seen pictures, and it's the greatest place in the world to live. Unless you have something you have to get done. Then, I mean, if you're on vacation, if you're a tourist, if you're a shut-in, it's paradise. If you have a job, an assignment, a deadline, stay in America. The problem is that Italy is just not set up to get anything done. And in fact, I think the whole country was purposely created just to give us a lesson in patience every day, whether we want it or not. And the reasons for this are varied in many. I mean, things are inexplicably closed, lines are long, they're out of things, and one of the things that make getting anything done in Italy hard is that the Italians don't like to do business over the telephone. You just can't talk to them over the phone about anything. And it took me a while to figure out what the problem is, why they were phonophobic, if that is a word. And finally, I realized that over the phone, they cannot use their vast array of hand gestures. which they're practically mute without those. So say you've got a problem with your house, your car, something like this, so you call the person responsible, and you say, look, you try to explain, you say, no, come over to my shop, come over to my store, come over to wherever I am, and let's talk about this. So you have to schlep over there, and then you start to explain, say, look, the work that was done, there's a problem, and it's just a terrible and disaster. So the first thing you get is this. And this means you think you've got a problem. Then I tell you about my miserable life. So then you say, well, look, this is the thing, I think the work, my own opinion, maybe this thing was put in backwards or it doesn't quite fit. So then you get this. Oh, that's crazy, that's impossible, I couldn't possibly make a mistake here. So they say, all right, look, I don't know, it's your fault, it's my fault, it doesn't matter, can you just come over this afternoon and take care of it? Then you get this. No way. And that's the polite interpretation of this gesture. No way. So finally say, all right, whatever it takes, look, I'll tell you what, I'll pay you double. Be right over. So people ask me if I'm fluent or anything, and I say that, if you know 50 words and 12 hand gestures, you can pretty much get through any situation in Italy. So another thing that really keeps things from getting done in any expedient way is the fact that the Italians are so charming and lovely and friendly that good morning is a 2-hour conversation. They have certain expectations that you are supposed to fulfill when you greet them, and the Italians call this fare una festa, and it literally means to make a party. And it goes something like this. They say, oh my God, look how great you look. Is that a new hairdo? Is that a new dress? And is this your baby? It's the most beautiful baby in the history of the world. And on and on and on. Now, this is all great and wonderful and friendly and everything, but didn't I just see you 20 minutes ago? Do we have to go through this again? And, frankly, there are days when I just don't want to follow in a festa with anybody. It's like, hi, that's the other. But these are things that you have to do. Now, you may be wondering, if I have so many complaints, what am I doing living there? Or you may be thinking to yourself, why don't you shut up, you lucky idiot? I live next door to a methane processing plant, and you don't hear me complain. Well, I apologize for the whining, but the truth is, none of this was my idea. No, this vision belongs to my lovely wife, Nancy, who became gripped with the idea that we would one day retire to Italy. And in all fairness, she was probably talking to me about this, but just because I was like looking at her and nodding, going, she probably assumed I was listening. Like, oh my God, we don't listen. So the net effect was that when she called me about this, it came as a complete shock. And what happened with our lives and how this actually came about is when Nancy and I first met, I was working as a writer-producer on a TV show, and Nancy was a set designer, so we were both working really, really crazy hours. And it seemed like all we ever did when we got together was complain about our jobs. So one day I was feeling in a very expansive mood, and I said, honey, if you're so unhappy, why don't you just quit your job and take a shot at yourself as an artist, like what you studied for? So about a month later, she comes home and she says, I did it, I quit my job. I said, you quit your job? Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? So, well, what she did is she really went back to her roots as an artist, and which was sculpting, and she got an opportunity to go to Italy and work in marble. And from almost from the beginning, it was successful for her. She began to get commissions and sell works of art. And in fact, just earlier this month, she had 12 of her sculptures installed in the campus of the University of California, Irvine. It's a remarkable accomplishment for any artist. Because we were getting tired of schlepping those things around. So the fact was that when she did call me with the breathless news that we had now owned a house in Tuscany, I was completely shocked and surprised. And this is how I described it in the book. Like many improbable adventures, it all began with a phone call. Ring, ring. It doesn't say that in the book, I just said that. Guess what? You're pregnant. I bought a house, Nancy said. You what? I gripped the receiver in astonishment. Where? Here in Italy. I rolled my eyes and winked. I think we could really be happy here. I'm happy here, I said. And how could you buy a house without me even seeing it? I had to move fast. But you'll see it now. How soon can you get here? Oh yeah, I'm gonna fly all the way from LA just because, yeah, come on, get over here. I'm still working on this damn script. I mumble as I peel the foil off a roll of Tums with my teeth. And then pilot season starts in a couple of, die, she said, which is how Italians say, come on. She'd been working there for so long, she'd started to think in their language. Just come take a look. And if you don't like it, we can always, she ended her sentence right there. Always what? Forget it, you're gonna love it. She then launched into all the reasons why I was gonna love it, and my eyes glazed over. I find myself watching the sun drop behind the Santa Monica Mountains. I've always wondered about people who could stare endlessly at sunsets and roaring fireplaces. For me, they were pointless because you knew that both were going to end in cold and darkness. The house is over 300 years old, she said, as if that were a good thing. It sits on a hill full of olive trees with a magnificent view of the village of Campione. And that's something I want to look at. The view is to die. What about the house? Is that to die too? I won't lie, it needs a little work. What a surprise. But the construction's pretty basic, except for putting in a road. Wait a minute, you bought a house on a hill that doesn't have a road? That's why we got it so cheap, she said triumphantly. Let me see if I got this. In the long history of Tuscany, which has been occupied by the Etruscans, the Greeks, the Romans, the Visigoths, the French, the Spanish, the Austrians, and the Nazis, and now the baby boomers, no one has ever thought to run a road up to this house. We'll put one in. We are talking about Italy, aren't we? Yeah, she said defensively. Do you see where I'm going with this? Relax, honey, there's always a way. The sun had dropped behind the mountain, and I sat in darkness. A few weeks later, I actually got to Italy, and Nancy met me at the airport. And for the entire drive there, she was like selling me on the house. Oh, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, peace and quiet. And we have our own olive trees. And the view of the village is just magnificent. And in fact, that part was quite true. The house sits on a hill overlooking the village, and the view is so panoramic that during World War II, the Germans used it as a gun emplacement. I guess to pick off stray Comunese whenever they got bored and everything. And so, additionally, she had hired this guy named Umberto. And Umberto was a master contractor, stonemason, who was just a genius at restoring these kind of houses. So as we pulled up to the house, I realized that we were driving up to the house on a freshly paved road. Well, I was impressed. This was certainly a good omen. And inspired by this, I started asking other questions about other kind of amenities we might possibly have. I don't know, running water, toilets, electricity, cable TV, you know, things I need. So here I learned a new word in Italian. You see, when you ask an Italian a question they don't really want to answer, they say, boh. Now, boh is more of a sound than a word. And what it means is, how the hell should I know? Leave me alone. So, we got to the house. Nancy and Umberto went off to discuss some kind of arcane problem with the construction. And I took a look at the house and realized where all the gold in our golden years was going to go. And this is how I describe my first view of the house. It was a small two-story affair that had fallen to such disrepair it was closer to a ruin than a dwelling. Wood planks lie rotting in the uncut grass, and there was so much debris scattered around, it looks as if the remains of a shipwreck had washed ashore. I was shaking my head at this folly when I found myself walking under a canopy made of cut branches that abutted the side of the house. Glancing up at the tangle of vines snaking around the trellis, I spotted a glorious cluster of cobalt blue grapes, as perfect as wax fruit, and is succulent enough to adorn the brow of Bacchus. I picked one and popped it in my mouth. The sweetness was so pure it staggered me, and for a long time afterwards I could taste the sun on my tongue. Oh no, I had only been here a few hours, and Tuscany was already beginning to work its magic. Its insidious charm and inexhaustible natural beauty were seducing me, and if I wasn't careful I was going to find myself feeling happy for absolutely no reason. I shook aside such subversive thoughts and pushed open the splintery wooden door. I entered and was immediately struck by the coolness and quiet inside the half-meter thick walls. The house was small, built to the measure of a man. Essentially, just a kitchen on the ground floor, connected by a rickety ladder to a bedroom above. As I batted away the cobwebs, my eyes were drawn to the hearth, which was nothing more than a knee-high platform for firewood. Over this, someone had fashioned a mortared hood so misaligned it allowed a black finger of soot to miss the flue and meander up the wall, where it found refuge in the methodical blackening of the center beam. I studied the thick accumulation of inky residue and pondered the drama that had played out inside the four walls. The births, the deaths, the quarrels, the passions, and those were just the goats. As for the human chronicle, I could not even fathom the complexities and vagaries of a dozen generations playing out their tragedies and comedies upon this tiny stage, of people living continuously inside a structure built when America was a colony. A house that had stood in silent witness to every famine, flood, and forest fire to be hurled at it over the past 300 years. The door swung open and Nancy entered. "I'm so pissed," she said, too angry to stop even though she was halfway inside the room. "You're not going to believe this. The Germans are back with their machine gun. Umberto's quitting." Didn't he just start? He got offered another job. And it didn't occur to him to finish ours first. He got offered another job so he couldn't finish ours. Who would do such a thing? Who? The Pingatoris, that's who. Wait, aren't those the people you bought this from? Bastardi! I'm sorry to be making a wrinkle in the fabric of your alternate universe, but I'm not following this. Don't you get it? They want their house back. Well, why did they sell it to us in the first place? Because nobody else would buy it because it didn't have a road. Yeah, speaking of that, where did that road? Suddenly the door flew open with a bang, and a wild-looking woman with flyaway hair and the deranged look of a spree killer stood in our doorway. "Putana," she screamed, her eyes glaring a malocchio so fierce it would calcify flesh. Nancy rose to protest, which only prompted the old woman to hurl curses and threats at us, building to a shriek of "Porca miseria," and all punctuated with the slamming of a door. What was that? Vesuvia Pingatori. Who? Mario Pingatori's sister. She seems to think that whoever put in that road tore down some of her trees and generally desecrated the sacred grounds of her childhood. Oh, great. Now we got a neighbor who hates us. Actually, it's a little worse than that. See, the road was put in abusivo, which means illegally, which is done all the time and is perfectly fine as long as nobody kicks up a fuss. Well, that looked like some big-time fuss-kicking to me. Yeah, she just went to the community campione and issued a denuncia against us. That sounds serious. Are we in trouble? Bo? Well, we were clearly in the soup, and it wasn't minestrone. We're facing some titanic struggles against the community campione, against the powerful Pingatori plan, and even with the very notion of living in Italy itself. So what we decided to do was to really take a long look at the situation and see how we're going to go about this. And there are plenty of bumps in the road, but there are also plenty of wonderful things that happened too. And one of the best things that happened was making friends with the Italians themselves. And you knew that you had become friends with the Italians when they gave you a nickname. The Italians are very famous for giving nicknames. In our village, there were people known as, there was a cross-eyed guy they called Occhi Storti, which means distorted eyeballs. And his wife, Donna Mata, crazy woman. There was a very short, almost a midget type person whose nickname was Culo Basso, which means your butt is too close to the floor. My nickname was Fellini because I had a penchant for videotaping what was going on. Although our neighbor, Mrs. Cipollini, gave me another nickname. Our typical day with us was that Nancy would put on her construction boots and her tool belt and go up to work with the guys in the house. And I would stay home and work on this book. So I mostly did a lot of the household chores. So I would do a load of wash and I would take it outside and hang it up on the line. And whenever I was hanging the wash up on the line, Mrs. Cipollini would come by and look at me and do one of these and say, "Buonasera, signora." But Nancy actually had the best nickname. She was the one who was really the driving force behind getting the house approved and all the paperwork we had to go through and the bureaucracy. and which, if you read the book, it just goes on and on and on. But and she was soft and purring when she had to be. She was snarling. She begged, bribed, borrowed, badgered, did everything she could. And for all her various techniques, the Italians called her rompicoglioni. Now the word rompare is the Italian verb to break. And coglioni, well, let's just say that's a part of a man's anatomy that he doesn't want broken. So that became her nickname. You know, the interesting aspect of living in Italy is becoming attuned to village life. And village life in Italy is very, very special. And I seem to think that you can often tell a lot about a society by what they ask you, how they get to know you. Like, for instance, here in America, we say, what do you do for a living? In China, they say, who's your family? But in Italy, they say, where's your village? Because that's kind of how they identify you. And place, a sense of place tells us who we are. And for that reason, growing up here in this area, in Hammond and Munster, I think very definitely defined my outlook, my personality. I was born in St. Margaret's Hospital. When I was born, I think it was during World War II. My father was in the Pacific, and my mom and I lived on Monroe Street with my grandmother. And as legend has it, I slept in a drawer. And I guess when I made too much noise, slammed the door. Then Dad came back from the war, and Debbie was born, and we moved to 1124 173rd Street, right on 173rd in Jarniki. And I pretty much grew up there, and went to Woodrow Wilson School and Hammond High School. When I was about 16, I guess, we moved to Northcott Avenue in Munster, and I went off to IU. Graduated from IU, and I got a job working in an advertising agency in Chicago, North Advertising, and I did that for about a year or so. And I always hankered to go into show business and try my hand at show business. And it's one of those things, I guess, in my youth, in my ignorance and arrogance, I thought you could just go to Hollywood not knowing anybody, and things would work out fine. And I went, and it was, of course, a struggle. I was extremely fortunate. I had a lot of good luck. I hung in there, and over the course of my career, I was extremely fortunate to work with some extremely talented people. I learned situation comedy writing from people like Norman Lear, from people like Mort Lachman and Sheldon Weiskopf, people whose bloodlines go back to I Love Lucy, and to Bob Hope, and Jack Benny. And after a very long, remarkably long career in the business, I think it was time for me to turn the page and move on to something else. You know, in Hollywood, when you retire, they don't give you a gold watch, you just stop returning your phone calls. So I think everyone kind of realized it but me, and I'm sort of struggling to hang in there. And I think it was Nancy, just so you don't get the wrong idea that the idea of Shall We Live in Italy, Shall We Live, was not about her will versus my will, or her way versus my way. But it was about the fact that she was afraid that I was stressing myself overly about going through a difficult period in a man's life when their career is ending and they're looking around for a new definition of themselves. And it's a very frightening period for a person, man or woman. You have defined yourself a certain way for 25, 30 years, and suddenly you have that gone. Who are you? What are you? What are you interested in? And it's a real process of reinvention, and oftentimes it's slow and painful. Nancy was intuitive enough to know that I had to get out of Hollywood, LA, or I would always be there pressing my nose up against the glass and calling friends and saying, well, what are you doing, or what are you doing, and stuff like that. So, in her wisdom, she dragged me off to Italy, thinking that was the last of it. And when I got there, I sort of was struck by how everything there was so screwed up, that nothing was working right, that everything was a problem. You know, and I'd say, like, I'd say to her, like, why is it that nobody has an answering machine? Why is it there's 3 kinds of size plugs in this house, but whenever I go to plug something in, it doesn't fit in any of them? So she would say, you want to know? Call 1-800-ITALY. I don't know. So eventually she says, you know, why don't you start writing these things down and just start doing this and keep a log of all the things that are bother you about this. So she thought she would get me out of her hair with this. Little did she know I was going to turn around and sell this book, because I had my revenge and drag her with me on the book tour. So there's no escape. So once again, I just want to say how grateful I am for all the people in this area for having me here and for entertaining us so warmly and with such great hospitality. And change is what it's all about. I think you have to embrace change and not fear it. And it's scary and it's terrible to leap off into the unknown, into the darkness, but most times it works out better. And even if sometimes it doesn't work out better at first, it can become better. So there's that. And I often think about how living in Italy has changed me. And I best summarized it if I may quote a passage from the book. This is how the ways that living in Italy has changed me. I hadn't been to a movie in 7 months, but I'd seen 5 operas. I'd been well trained by an army of waiters never to sprinkle Parmesan cheese on pasta with seafood in it, and not even to think about getting a cup of coffee until after the meal has been eaten. I discovered there was life after the Cubs because I started to follow our local soccer team, tooting my horn at every fellow tifoso, sports fan I passed when we won, and sulking around the house, unable to speak when we lost. Moreover, I began to relish how everything closes down for 3 hours in the middle of the day, so there's always time to eat lunch, drink wine, and make love. When I first arrived, I thought the Italians were crazy, but now I know that they're sane, and it's the rest of the world that's gone mad. And just so you won't think that I've gotten too soft or too Italian, I'll tell you what happened just before we left, the last time we were in Italy, just about a month before we were leaving. I got an email from the publisher of this book, and they said, well, we need this form filled out immediately, ASAP, fax it to us. So I pulled out the paperwork and went down to the village to get this thing essentially faxed. Now, you wouldn't necessarily call this the impossible dream to get something faxed from even Italy to New York, right? So when I got down to the village, I realized it was Wednesday afternoon. Now, on Wednesday afternoon, the 3 stores that can do this kind of thing are all closed. Now these stores are called cartellina, essentially stationary stores, mom and pop shops really, and we're not talking about Office Max here. But on Wednesday afternoon, all 3 of them have decided to be closed. Why are they all closed on Wednesday afternoon? Well, normally I would take it in stride. Normally I would get a little upset, but if I was having a real I hate Italy day, I'd go have some gelato, because I can usually make anything right. But today, for some reason, it really got to me. I got upset. Suddenly it's like, oh, the publisher's going to think I'm an idiot, I can't even get something fast, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm steaming up and down the walking street going, we can get live television from the planet Jupiter, that's no problem. But to get a goddamn fax from here to there, it's impossible. So I run to a friend of mine, Ricardo, and he sees that I'm upset. And he says, Filippo, che così fai? What's going on? What's the matter? And I launch into chapter and verse. I'm in this town and I can't get this and this. Ending on, this country is killing me. Well, Ricardo throws his arms around me and kisses me on both cheeks. And I said, what'd you do that for? He said, my friend, you live in the Garden of Eden and all you do is complain. You have finally become a real Italian. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Sitting in silent admiration, was that it? Did I use up all the words here? Yeah, sure, please.
Are you still writing at all for sitcoms
No,
or?
I haven't done any of that. I sort of walked away from that about 5 years ago. And sometimes I get a twinge of kind of missing. I miss sometimes the camaraderie of being with the guys and stuff like that. And then I think about cold Chinese food at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then some 26-year-old network executive throwing out a script, and I go, you know, it's better. So I'm not doing that anymore. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Have any Italian in your ancestry?
Gee, I don't think so. What do you think? Have anybody?
They accepted that fine.
What was that? What was that? What was that uncle with the big nose who drank all the red wine? Was he Italian or just Hungarian? We don't know what he is. Yeah.
Do you have the screenplay rights to your book?
Yes, I do. Well, there's some conversation so far, but you know, these things are very tricky to navigate and take a long time. But hey, you know, who knows? Stranger things have happened. Yes.
Do you have pictures of your house?
As a matter of fact, I do. In fact, I have better than pictures. We have this is a video that I made just when we were first moving in. And this will give you an idea of what the house used to look like.
I think I turned the volume off, so just flip the switch, Phil. Here, I'll get it.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, that was the story. We made that video so we could show our friends and relatives what we got ourselves into. And it took a long time. It took almost 6 years of constant, hurry up and wait, because a lot of part of the problem was actually getting the community permission, to give us permission to make improvements, because in Italy, there's so much bureaucracy. There's like a million rules and no laws. Everywhere you look, there's a law against something. And if something has not been built on a place, you can't build. If something hasn't been improved, you can't improve it. So on and on and on. And one of the biggest problems we had was the community took the position that the house didn't exist. That even though it had been there for like 4 centuries, that it had never been properly registered, so it didn't have an address. And so we literally spent weeks searching through the archives for any that kind of shredded documentation that listed the house, like a surveyor's report. How we finally got proof the house is in the books. I don't want to spoil the light of the book, as they say, but it was just a very lucky stroke that we happened to find something that proved it and everything. But it was a long haul. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a cadre of expatriate American friends over there?
Yeah, there actually there are quite a few Americans and Brits there. I learned kind of early on if we were going to stay here. I said to Vance, I said, I like the Italians, but for me to get to the language level, to be able to have, one thing to be able to order in a restaurant or something or get on a flight train, but another to appreciate a joke or the nuances of a story. So I said, we're going to meet some people who speak English. So we met some English, and I couldn't understand them either. But actually, they're probably more English than Americans at this point. The area where we are is actually called Chianti-shire because there's so many Brits there. But we have a nice group of about 10, 12 people that we see all the time that are English speaking. So. Yeah.
Are you pleased with the result?
Of the house? Yeah, the house is magnificent, really is. We actually were able to double the size of it, and it's small. I mean, it was small to begin with, and it's still not huge, but it's now the right size for 2 people and that. And it's not a villa. I mean, it's a basic farmhouse, stone farmhouse and stuff, and it's a working farmhouse. We have 150 olive trees, and we had our first harvest of olive oil in November, and I have to say, I never worked so hard in my life as harvesting olives. What are you laughing at?
Because you didn't do anything.
Oh, well, that's true, but even just hiding from the work was exhausting. I locked myself in the office and I said, honey, I'm working. She said, well, did you hand the book in 2 weeks ago? I said, well, but I had some second thoughts and stuff. But there were days I just couldn't get out of it, and I would spend these back-breaking. Harvesting olives, by the way. We made our first pressing of olive oil. It's called Extra Virgin Nancy. I have to say, when was the last time those 3 words were used in succession? The actual method of harvesting olives is identical to how they used to do it in the 15th century. You essentially take a stick and you beat the tree with the stick. That was it. And you beat the tree until the olives fall down and they fall into nets. And in our case, because we're on a hillside, they roll down the hillside and they come to the bottom of the hillside. We pack them up, put them on a truck, and we take them to this olive mill called a Frantoia, and they mill the olives into oil. And all I have to say is, people have said to me that farming is very spiritual. And I've discovered that to be true because every day I would say, thank God I don't have to do this for a living. This is the worst stuff in the world. But it was marvelous. We got a lot of olive oil out of it. And I think we're going to try to go into bigger production next year, maybe do 300 trees and see if we can actually put it out commercially and everything. So, yeah, yes.
So do we get to see pictures of the finished house?
Well,
have to go over to Debbie.
yeah, if you go to Debbie, she's got pictures of the finished house. It's very different, but it has the same, hopefully the same charm and everything. Okay, if there's no more questions, oh, I'm sorry.
How much of your year, Phil, do you spend on this?
Essentially about half and half. We spend about 6-7 months there, and the remainder in California. We tend to go there. I guess we would be living right now, if not for the book and stuff. But we go from April to around October, November, then olive harvest, then we come back to California for the rest. So not a bad way to do it. Yes.
I'm videoing this so we have it recorded. When do I get my liter of olive oil?
I mean, well, come there and get it. We actually managed to come back with a tin thing that was about 10 liters of olive oil. Don't ask how we got it from customs, got it in the plane, it's sloshing, it's seeping, it's leaking. I'm just waiting for some guy from TSA to roll up and stick his hand into it and say, let's see what's in here, nitroglycerin or what. But you gotta come to Italy, it's much easier that way. And so, if there are no other questions, I'd be happy to sign some books, so, I'm sorry.
How far are you from places like Florence, Montepulciano, the San Gimignano?
You know, Tuscany's small. By train, Florence is about an hour and a half from us. By car, it's 3 days. You know, driving in Italy, we do a lot about talk about driving in Italy. It's a blood sport. It really is. Everybody's around. And I discovered that no matter how fast you're going in Italy, someone will pass you. It does not matter. And if you go on the autostrada and you squint, you can imagine these guys 2,000 years ago whipping the chariots around with that glint in their eye, you know. But the thing that's always baffled me is why they have to drive so fast so they can get to the cafe and sit for 3 hours. It's not as if anybody's in a hurry, but this is that. Tuscany's pretty small. We're close to San Gimignano, maybe 2 hours drive. Siena's 2.5 hours, something like that. And we're not in the actual classic Chianti part of the postcard, you know, under the Tuscan sun part we have the vineyards. We're more on the coast. It's more agricultural, a lot just, you know, crops, basically. A lot of people growing crops. And a lot of olive trees and stuff like that. But it's sort of off the beaten path as far as the tourists go. They don't quite come to our neck of the woods too often. Yes?
Have you ever tried making wine from the grapes?
That may be the next project. I don't know. We don't have any vineyard, but people around us do. We've picked grapes. We've joined them in picking the grapes. That's a little bit more of a joyous process than the olives and everything. But yeah, people, you know, winemaking there is like it's passed down generation to generation, as you know, and they take great pride. And in fact, I do a lot about it in the book. I talk about how they're obsessed to the point of madness with with the wine stuff, and it's they're funny about it. Okay. All right. Well, I'm willing to sign some books.
Do you have any air conditioning in the summer?
No. We're fortunate in that we're on a bit of a hill, and we do get a bit of some sea breeze. We're about 10 miles from the Mare. Last summer was very mild, but the summer before was fierce. That was the summer that people were dropping dead in France and stuff, and it was hot everywhere. But it wasn't bad where we were. But yeah, I mean, electricity, utilities is so expensive in Italy, and all through Europe, as you know, that you don't have the resources, and they're very frugal. The Italians, I mean, will sit in a dark room with no lights and no heat. That's just their general thing, and they just do that. And this, you know, this comes from living through World War II and the Depression and stuff like that. And, you know, we're Americans, so I turn on all the lights. And it's funny, we were building the house. There was going to be one room for the office, so the electrician asked through Nancy what I want. I said, I want sockets here, 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 there. You know, typically I have like 27 things to plug in. So I come down, he finishes work, and I walk in, and there's one socket. So, and I said, well, okay. So then I said, I told you what I need. He says, look, he says, take one socket, get like a surge protector with six plugs, use that, and plug everything into your surge protector. And then if you need more, put another one in. So I feel like a real wasteful, you know, American stuff. And he was right. That's the way it's worked. So it's Yeah.
As a practical matter, were you able to project your budget fairly accurately as to what it would cost you to restore and live and so forth in Italy? Or?
You know, actually, it came up pretty good. We were delightfully surprised that we were able to keep it in that ballpark, as it were. I would say that to get this kind of custom, the amount of custom work that we got done in America would be a lot more expensive. But this is something that they do routinely. And the interesting thing also is essentially 4 guys did most of the work. And it's, speaking of the nickname, 2 of our workers, we had 2 workers that if you ask them the same question, one would say, no, we can't do this. The other would say, okay, sure, no problem. So we call them va bene and problema. Everything was either va bene or was a big problema. So, and they were great, and they did everything. They would like do the roofs, and they would do the glazing, the windows, they would do the framing and everything. So it worked out good. It worked out reasonably okay. All right.
I just wanted to say, with a portion of the proceeds going to hospice of the Calumet area, this is a particular wonderful thing for us to receive, and for Phil's patience and generosity in coming here to be with us today, and with his wife Nancy, how about another round of applause? I guess we could form a line starting right up this way for those of you who want autographs.
Oh, you have to go and get them. Oh, I see.